kind of where this this session came from. And I hope we all get to learn something tonight, and we'll kind of kick off Bear Week for the Education Center. And I hope you all will participate later in the week as well. Certainly, County Council welcomes comments or questions later on. If you have any, you can send an email to County Council online and let us know what you think. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My name is Ariel Perraglio. I'm a conservation officer, also known as a game warden with New Mexico Game and Fish. I've been with the department for about 7 years now. I got my wildlife science degree from New Mexico State University prior to starting this job. And when I first started, I was in the TA and trauma area. And about 4 years ago, I moved to the Jemez and Cuba district. So currently, I don't know if a lot of people in Los Alamos know, we don't have a district officer in Los Alamos. So myself and my sergeant, who I'll let introduce himself in a minute, do our best to field the calls that come in. Sarge, can you introduce yourself?
It's not working. How about there? Closer, real close. Okay, my name is Sergeant Ben Otero. So I have 4 officers who work for me. So I have Cuba, Jemez, or Española, and then Chama and TA. Right now we have 3 officers. We're missing Española, but we're getting a new one in December. So hope I'll be full for the first time in 4 years. Ariel will be happy with that, so we can help out in Los Alamos area or anywhere in the surrounding area. I've been on 13 years, and I started off in Española, and I've been up here ever since. So I never left. I fell in love with it. So I got my degree at New Mexico State in range science, and that was my first introduction into getting into game and fish, was to get that degree. And I'll be here for any questions to help Ariel at the end as well, because I know there's probably a lot of questions about wildlife, especially in Los Alamos area in particular.
Okay, I think we're ready to go. So I already introduced myself. The reason I'm here today is to kind of talk to you guys about how to safely coexist with wildlife in a town such as Los Alamos with minimal negative interactions. So the first one I want to talk about is mule deer. We have a lot of mule deer in Los Alamos. There's a lot here, really thriving population. These guys are browsers, meaning that they like shrubs, clover, sometimes grasses, and they really like your gardens or the decorative plants that you may have in your yard. These guys easily adapt to living around humans. I'm sure you're aware. You'll see them in front yards, backyards. They have no problem being around people once they're adapted to us. Does typically have twins. That'll be in the late spring, early summer, which is one of the reasons that they thrive. They have twice the amount of offspring that elk would. Leading predators in New Mexico are going to be cougars, bears, and coyotes, and that'll kind of tie in later when we start talking about the predators that we find in towns like Los Alamos. So this is something that we see in not only here in Los Alamos, but other small mountain communities. In this picture, if you look at the railroad ties on the bottom, there's obviously feed there, and that's why that buck is there. So I want to focus on not feeding wildlife. So things that you can do around your office or your home is keeping a clean, maintained yard. And something, I have a couple pictures in here that we see here in town. Hanging yard decorations high if and when you can. And what I mean by that are Christmas lights, Halloween decorations, hammocks, we see those. If you can hang them high, it's best. If you can bring them in the afternoons and evenings, even better. We want to remove pet food and water from our yards. The animals don't need supplemental feed from us. They're doing just fine without us kind of interjecting. Another thing you can do is utilizing electric fencing or deer repellent. Deer repellent is sold in a lot of hardware stores. I'm not sure if Metzger's has it, but you can also get it online. So Kristen and I kind of talked about when it might be appropriate to call us in to interject. So this little guy that you see here, I believe this was in 2021. It was in the middle of COVID. We were all wearing masks. So if you can see, he has a plastic tub that his head is stuck in. He cannot eat, obviously, can't drink, can barely breathe. It was really tight around his ears were all the way in. So he was really in there. And I can't say for absolute certainty that he was in there because of food, but in this area, we had been receiving calls and complaints about people putting out corn and birdseed for deer. So myself, Dr. Ramsey, a couple of her volunteers, and then some residents from the neighborhood I had to chase this guy around for about an hour until I was able to dart him and then remove the plastic bin from his head. Talking about decorations in your yard. So the buck that you see on your left has a Halloween ghost hanging from his antlers. And we received a lot of calls about him. We were finally able to find him, dart him, and remove the ghost from his head. And the buck on the right, that's my sergeant there. This was, I think, last summer, fall. This is a hammock that's stuck in his antlers. So as many of you probably know, deer do shed their antlers every spring, late winter, but these guys weren't about to shed. They had a while to go, and the hammock, the ghost, were covering their eyes. So they're not able to see vehicles, they're not able to see food, things like that. So then we have to come in and kind of intervene. This is an appropriate time to call us because these guys, they're probably not going to do well on their own. The reason we want to try to do our best to prevent things like this is anytime that we have to come in and dart an animal, it's not a guarantee that that animal is going to handle the drugs well. So we always hope that they're going to wake up and we do our best to take care of them, but it's not a guarantee. So doing what we can to remove these things from our yard always helps. And then another one that we get here, so this is a mule deer fawn. We get calls about these guys being stuck in people's backyards. So sometimes does will jump your fence, come in, have their fawns in your yard, and then the fawns can't get back out. So the very first thing, of course, that you can do is opening that gate and see if mom will lead them out. And if it's been a few days and they can't, then of course call us and we'll do our best to come get them out of there. This is another one of our officers and hunter ed program guys. So if you encounter elk calves and deer fawns, whether that's in the field or in your yard, in neighborhoods, you always want to leave them alone as the mom's typically not far off. If something that you can look for, if their ears start to curl, that means that they're dehydrated. At that point, you can call us so we can come in and assess that animal. Moving on to black bears. This is another one that we have a thriving population of in this town. These guys are omnivores, meaning that they will eat anything and everything. They're very opportunistic in the calories that they're intaking. So that's grasses, shrubs, nuts, but also your trash, anything that you leave out, bird food, dog food, things like that. Cubs will typically stay with mom for about 1.5 years. These guys are very territorial. They're also really fast. They can reach speeds of about 35 miles per hour, and they can climb trees, no problem. So things that you can do to prevent negative interactions with them around your home or office. Again, keeping that maintained yard, putting up, and I'm not sure if this is allowed in Los Alamos, putting up motion activated yard lights. Is that something you guys can do? Okay, I'm getting a yes. Putting up pet food and water, bringing that in. If you feed your animals outside, bring that food in at night. Putting up bird feeders. So if you have hummingbird feeders and bird feeders out, bring them in at night and clean up anything that falls down on the ground from those. That's a big attractant for them. Don't put out your trash until the morning of pickup. You want to keep it locked up. I have another slide with some suggestions for that. And you can always clean your trash bins and spray them with ammonia. That's really offensive to their noses, so that's a good deterrent. And if you can avoid it, don't have freezers or on your patios or porches, because they can figure out how to get into them. That's kind of more of a rural thing that we see, but if you have it and you can avoid it. Cleaning grills and smokers after each use. If you have fruit trees in your yard or like behind your house in the canyon, cleaning up the ripening fruit from the ground, because if you can smell it, bears can absolutely smell it, and that's going to bring them in. You want to put, if you can, electrical fencing around compost piles if you have them, and bee boxes. Again, that's something that you can get on Amazon or at hardware stores. For these guys, we had a call the other night about a bear trying to get into chickens at a chicken coop. So protect your livestock by keeping them in secure housing at night. So if you look at the yellow trash bin, I just Googled, what did I Google? How to secure trash bins from bears. And this comes up on Amazon, and it's $21.99. And it's just a simple strap that goes over the top of your bin to lock that lid. Now, they're not going to work 100% of the time every time, but it's going to deter the bear from your bin. And if they can't get in easily, chances are they're just going to move on. There's a lot of different contraptions on the internet for this. You can also use bungee cords and ratchet straps. So with bears, when to call is going to be kind of situation dependent. I don't want to give like a blanket guideline for this, but if you're, say, out hiking and you see a bear on a hiking trail in the woods, just enjoy it. You don't need to call us for that. That's where they're supposed to be, as long as they're not acting aggressive. Now in town, if a bear does anything that scares or threatens you, then that would be an appropriate time to call. Another one that we get is people will call thinking that they've seen a bear cub that's abandoned or alone. So, Sarge, you can kind of tell me if I'm wrong here, but the guideline that I'll tell people is, okay, is that cub, say, as big as a Labrador? If it is, then it's probably last year's cub, and it's probably just starting to go out on its own. Now, if it's little and looks like it's maybe under 30 pounds, smaller than, say, a blue heeler, then that's going to be likely this year's cub that's with mom. Is that a good guideline? Okay. Now, moving on to cougars and mountain lions, same thing. The name's interchangeable here in New Mexico. These guys are classified as carnivores, and they will mainly eat fresh meat from the prey that they've killed. Kittens will typically stay with mom for about 1.5 years, same as bears. And the females will usually have about 2 to 3 kittens. Mountain lions, like bears, are territorial, and they can be between 70 to 200 pounds. So they're big animals. Things to do in cougar country, and we are in the middle of cougar country. If you see a cougar, don't run. You want to back away slowly. Lost my place. Raise your hands above your head to appear larger and talk in a loud, commanding voice. So you want to look bigger and louder than they are. You can use bear spray on cougars. Around your home, same thing. You want to keep a clean, maintained yard. And so something that we've had a issue with in the past, I would say 6 months or so to a year, is we've had several dogs killed in Los Alamos by mountain lions. So to kind of try to prevent that, dogs have to go potty before bed at night. So you turn on a back light, porch light, whatever it is, flashlight, shine it in the backyard, wherever you're going to let them go out to potty. You want to light it up first, make noise, make your presence known. Don't just let your dog go outside by itself. You also, if you can, don't let your dog sleep outside at night. You can Again, put up motion activated lights. And then the same thing with bears. These guys are really deterred by livestock that are inside a locked enclosure. So out at the stables, we've had a few sheep and goats killed, and none of them have been from a locked, secured stable or from a stable that has electric fencing on the top wire. Don't keep water out for wildlife. They just don't need it. We don't have to supplement them. So assure, we get calls about what people think could be a cougar sign. So if you look at this picture in the snow, the easiest way to tell that you're looking at cougar tracks and not a dog is there's not going to be claws out. So mountain lions are a cat. They walk with their claws retracted. So if you see this rounded toe like that, probably a mountain lion. Could also be a bobcat. So on these guys, same thing with bears. It's hard to give like a blanket guideline of them. If you see one, it's really, really rare to see these guys. So if you're seeing one running around in the daytime, we want to know about that probably. If you just see it kind of skirting off in the canyon, you don't have to call us. But if it's running down 41st Street at 10 o'clock in the morning, then yeah, we want to know about that one. These guys, like I said, we've had a few dogs killed, we've had goats, we've had sheep killed. So anything like that, we definitely need to know about as well. Other critters that you're going to see in town: coyotes, bobcats, raccoons. These guys, it's the same. Bobcats you won't see very often. We do get calls about raccoons. They're just like bears, and they're trash pandas is their nickname. So if you can secure your trash from them, great. Coyotes, they are opportunistic as well, and they will go after cats that are out wandering at night. So keep your pets inside. Now, when I talk about contacting Game and Fish, we have a few different phone numbers. So the first one I have listed here is Operation Game Thief, OGT. That's going to be the one that you'll call if you find, say you're out hiking and you find a mule deer that has its head cut off. Call that number so that we can come out, send an officer to investigate the scene. If it's something maybe not pressing, you can call our call center. This is going to be banker's hours, Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. If you call on a Friday, the odds that we're going to get that call that weekend are pretty much slim to none. We're not going to get it until Monday morning. So if it's an emergency, you can call. So officers are dispatched through New Mexico State Police. So you can always call 911, of course. You can call State Police non-emergency dispatch. The number is listed there, and you can always call your local Los Alamos dispatch. So in closing, the presentation, this is not to scare people or discourage you from calling us or shame you if you've maybe been putting out feed or not securing your trash. This is all about education. So if you guys have any questions, now is the time to ask, and no question is silly. You have 2 officers here. You also have park fed guys here that can answer questions. I wish I'd put some pictures. Okay, so the question is, how can you tell the difference between a cave or a bear den, right? Is that the question you asked? Okay. So Sergeant Otero and I actually have helped some students that are doing research projects on bear dens. And the dens that we came across, I'm not kidding you when I tell you the holes were like less than a foot tall. I don't know how these bears are squeezing into these holes. So there's really no blanket way to tell. If you're seeing a lot of bear poop, which is pretty big, and it'll have nuts and berries in it, it'll look different from dog poop. If you're seeing a lot of that around, then it could potentially be a bear den. Bears don't really sleep in a den during the summer. So they'll be kind of out, maybe laying underneath a tree, in a tree, but they won't generally be in a bear den in the summer. Oh, that's a hard question. You can have a bird bath out, but I think you should be aware that you're probably going to bring other animals in. So there's a couple residents in town that have ponds, small ponds in their backyards, and those are bringing in bears, lions, and who knows what else that we're not catching on camera. So if you want to have a bird bath out, that's probably okay. Just don't put out, I guess, so we have people that will put out troughs of water for wildlife. We don't want to be doing that. Bird feeders are also one that I would recommend having out in the wintertime, even the fall, but not necessarily in the spring and the summer when bears are really trying hard to get those calories in to fatten up for winter. Yes, so one of our officers is saying that they empty out their kiddie pool in the evening. That way nothing comes in and waters from it at night. So that's a really good idea for bird baths too. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. So the question is, outside of negative human-wildlife interactions, what are the other negative impacts of feeding wildlife? So our staff veterinarian, Dr. Ellen Crockett, did a really good presentation at one of the council meetings. It's been a couple months now. And the big takeaway from that is when you cause wildlife, we'll focus on deer. If you're feeding deer and you have a lot of them congregating in your yard, the likelihood that they're going to transmit illnesses and disease increases because typically they're not congregating like that out in the wild. So looking at, I guess, more back east, we don't have a huge problem with chronic wasting disease in New Mexico. It's something that we're constantly testing for, but back east, they do have an issue with it because they have a lot of deer and they also have feeding stations and baiting stations. So those animals are what she called artificially congregating. So we want to prevent that because I know that we want to help the animals and that's what we think we're doing by feeding them, but you're actually doing the opposite. If you kind of start paying attention to the deer in town here, you'll see some of them have really large growths on their body, and those are warts. And warts, some of them are tumors. They're typically benign, according to the vet, but they're only passed back and forth by that close quarters contact. So we're essentially making them, thank you, essentially making them sick when we do that. My sergeant wants to add to that.
So good question. I would like to add a little bit of the negative interactions that we see, right? If you're feeding wildlife, in particular, deer or elk, any type of ungulate, what we see is that also brings in the predators. So wherever the deer are, the mountain lions come in. And so they get used to human interactions around. They know, okay, if I hear that can shaking at 5 o'clock, there's going to be deer there. That's my natural prey. Also, what happens is maybe the deer don't know the animals there, the predator. So then that predator then focuses on dogs, cats, those types of things. So what we see in that negative interaction, like you're talking about, is one thing leads to the next thing, which eventually leads to where the predator goes too far with the human interaction. So we'll see the bears get used to you feeding, someone feeding the corn. Well, then that corn doesn't show up. Well, now the corn bag is inside the house. So they got to go inside the house. And so that's where we see some of that negative interaction with wildlife. And it's not only here in Los Alamos, it's in a lot of our mountain towns. There's certain communities that's just what they've been doing for years, right? And it's not necessarily a good thing in the long run because, like she said, chronic waste disease has been detected in New Mexico, and the states around us have all had chronic waste disease. You could look up that map, and we're getting surrounded by it. So, you know, the more that we can do our best to not have that in New Mexico, because what will happen is a large population of our deer and elk will die, and it'll be very hard to recover from that. Just based off of that one disease.
One other really quick thing that the vet also said is deer are really not, I don't want to say finicky, but they have a specific diet and they can process and digest certain things that they're evolved to do. So when we start introducing corn, sweet feed, things like that, that potentially upsets their digestive system as well. They can't digest it. So, any other questions? Yes, sir. Yes, that's something that's tricky with that in Los Alamos is one, there's a no firearm discharging within city limits. So we couldn't have a hunt in town. So down in Silver City, there is a population management hunt for does, and it's kind of like on the outskirts of town. Right. And so that is something that we have implemented in other areas where we have a really high population.
So the question was, when would be a good time to harvest does and to help the population dynamics within the city limits is kind of what you're asking. So we've talked about it in Los Alamos, because we are seeing that the amount of human interactions drastically increasing. And so we haven't implemented anything here. We have seen a lot more car accidents. We've seen more predators in town, and we are starting to see the disease. We're talking about it. It's no decision has been made, but if that does happen, there'll be a lot of steps, a lot of public comment before we ever decide on anything like that. For right now, it's a no. However, we are aware of the changing dynamics here in Los Alamos in particular. I don't know how close we are, but we have talked about it more than we were 10 years ago. So I would say we're moving towards that way. However, until we can actually put some science behind it and see what is happening here, and that's kind of our job. We're seeing it every day and then taking samples from here and making sure that the disease, we're not seeing chronic waste show up and things like that. Because if that happens, then we will see some drastic measures probably be taken. So yes, we do have a hunt in Silver City. So the question was, do we have success in the hunt in Silver City? Yes. So there was a lot of feeding that goes on in a certain community outside of Silver City, and we have seen success there. A lot more people have stopped feeding, and the reason I know that is I'm originally from Silver City, so I have firsthand knowledge of this, and the hunt has been successful, and people have been open to it to kind of keep that population managed there. Right. So he asked if we have an outbreak of disease in our population, we lose a lot more animals. Yes, we would. You would see more animals suffering, and there'd be nothing we could do about it. And that's what we want to stop beforehand. So, like, chronic waste disease causes starvation, lack of their nervous system working correctly. So it's a long, pronounced death. It's not instant. So you would see a lot more of that. And then when we come back to feeding, you're gonna see them more getting used to humans and relying on that food. And so if you're feeding the deer, for example, and then you decide, well, I'm gonna leave, and you quit feeding deer, well, who's gonna take that spot of that? The deer are still gonna show up there. However, you're not gonna be there no more, and your next neighbor may not feed, right? So that's what we're trying to say, but let's pass the word to not feed, even though it's very tempting and we all love seeing the animals. It does cause more issues than not. There's a question in the back.
But I wonder about the idea of if not just feeding them, they just show up and are so persuasive to eat. That is there anything you can recommend as far as seems like you could pretty much say scream at them and they will just look here in the South. Is there anything you recommend as far as thinking about population in the South? How to that?
So she asked if it's a lost cause to not have habituated deer or elk. So the question is, no, it's not a lost cause. but it is going to take a community effort. And what that means is bring the community together. We stop feeding deer, and that's going to be very hard, right? Change our habits to feed during the day for hummingbirds and birds in general, and then take your bird feeders down at night, especially during the summer. In the wintertime, it's not as big a deal to have bird feeders up because birds need food during the winter and there's a population here. So I think eventually we can reverse that. Los Alamos has already done a great job of getting out the word to their community and talking about bears. Obviously, we have the Bear Fest. That's a huge thing in this community. Also, the Los Alamos County has provided bear-proof dumpsters that we're starting to work towards. So these types of things are starting to move. And I've been here 13 years, like I said, and we've only seen movement in this in the past few years. So it's a community effort. The community loves the deer. We love the deer. We just want to make sure that these deer are staying wild. The other animals are staying wild as well, so that we don't have these drastic population dynamics where it'll be reduced due to disease and human interaction. Because we want it to be a positive experience for the community of Los Alamos. And you live here for a reason. You want the mountains, you want the wildlife, and so do we. We also need to just make sure that everyone can cohabitate together. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm curious, when Officer Perraglio came to the council meeting and spoke about the problem and the veterinarian and Dr. Ramsey, it seemed like we were beyond the point of just putting out, I don't want to say just putting out information, because as you, Sergeant Perraglio, said, there's been a lot of information put out there. The community has been very good at communicating, educating the community on what to do and what not to do. So could you comment on like the ordinance they put in Ruidoso?
Sure. So the question was, we've given a lot of information to Los Alamos community over the years, New Mexico Game and Fish, along with the local community here. And the question is, will we want to comment on the city ordinances, in particular on feeding like Ruidoso, correct? So we did propose that, and that is something that we are seeing in some of these communities that are trying to change that behavior. We as well have a statute that we have always looked at as we're going to educate. And for the past, since I've been the sergeant here in 8 years, we've educated a lot. And I think that we're getting to the point now where we will probably start citing people, because sometimes it just gets to the point where it's gone too far. And we are afraid that the next thing that could happen would be something with the general public. We've already had 3 bear attacks in this area in the past few years. We do not want to see that again. We do not want that to happen. We don't want the wrong circumstance to happen in bears or cougars. So we are trying to be proactive in that. So you may see some more proactive on our part in the local community, and probably a less leeway than we have been before. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Ruidoso ordinance says that the first complaint that it would be investigated, and then get a written warning, not a citation. If this is under their ordinance, and then the repeat offense, you would get a citation. And I know Officer Perraglio has had a repeat offender very close to our home, feeding deer. But the police department here has said they would have no problem enforcing an ordinance such as this. And do you think that would it be your opinion, your personal opinion? I don't want to ask you on behalf of the department, but that we should try and put something like this into effect here.
So she asked if we my personal opinion. My personal opinion may differ than most. So a personal opinion on if a city ordinance should be put into effect. Los Alamos County has that jurisdiction, and I think that would be up to them to put that in effect. For us, we are giving the warnings for now, and we are documenting those, and we are taking the next step to go forward in citations. So I don't really want to say my personal opinion right now, if you don't mind, but you know, for our jobs, that's which direction that we're going with it. And we're gonna still work closely with the county, and hopefully they'll pass something one day, because they are here more than us, because obviously we are only a few of us for a large portion of the state, and we have a lot of places to be. And if they would do that, we would support it.
So the question is, let me try to paraphrase it. So Los Alamos has done a really, really good job with bear awareness, how to coexist around bears. Something that we're not seeing a lot of is education on cougars, how to live with them, how to prevent issues with them, and what could we do alongside the county to improve that. So we really, in the past year, have seen a drastic increase in wildlife complaints that pertain to mountain lions. So, and I'll let my sergeant talk about this a little bit more, but I've been with the department, like I said, for 7 years. Up until 2021, I had never had a mountain lion complaint. And since then, I've had, I couldn't even tell you the number right now. Like you said, we have had several that we've had to kill in Los Alamos because they were killing dogs, killing goats, killing sheep. So I think it's kind of newer territory that we're going to have to start pushing out that education. We were dealing with a lot of bears. County did really great work with getting the bear bins, things like that, talking about bears. So now maybe we need to shift our focus to cougars also.
So a big thing that is driving this as well, come back to feeding, right, and deer. So a big thing that's driving this is our deer population is down in the forest, in my opinion. That's my opinion, because we're out there a lot. And what we're seeing is these mountain lions are traveling here, because this is where the deer are. And so we are seeing more increasing of that because our population of deer is down. And a lot of it has to do with drought. We've had a long drought, and all the deer come here because it's easy. There's water, there's feed for them. And so the lions are following, and we're seeing an increase in that. And we believe that's why. So we do need to start getting out the cougar information, like you said, and we do have information on that as well. So thank you for the suggestion that where we've lacked. We'll get better at that as well, because we have posters and stuff that we'll put out at trailheads, and we'll start doing that as well. Yeah, so she said that the information getting out to the public is on a rotating basis due to the amount of population that changes here due to Los Alamos labs. So we are always educating as much as we can to get everyone educated. Obviously, that's not possible, but yeah, we could definitely do better on the cougar side of things. Yes, sir. I'll hire you for that. You could chase him around. Any other questions, concerns? Yes, sir. So he asked if we've seen a difference since the council meeting, and I believe there was a newspaper article as well. Am I wrong? And we have seen a difference, actually. We've seen a decrease, but we've seen an increase of people calling. So that's what we want, right? That was a good educational, hey, my neighbor's over here feeding. And we can go talk to them and say, hey, these are our reasons why. Maybe they didn't see that presentation, right? But most people, like she said a minute ago, do rotate through here, and maybe they came from somewhere where that might have been acceptable. For example, Texas. You can do it there, right? You can do it in other states. So that's another barrier that we have. This is a international community here, a lot of different ethnic backgrounds, a lot of backgrounds in general. And so what you see is different backgrounds have learned different things and where they're from, right? I mean, it's perfectly legal in Texas to feed all you want. Come here, you can't do that. So that's where our job is to figure out, hey, does this person need education versus writing a citation? But yes, we have seen a decrease in feeding. Yes, ma'am.
State law that says no feeding of animals, and I think it says that there be a citation if they're creating a nuisance, and what that nuisance, the definition of that particular nuisance.
Yeah, so she asked what is the state law when it comes to saying it creating a nuisance, and what is a nuisance. So a nuisance is just an annoyance, right? So that could be interpreted a lot of different ways. What annoys you may not annoy me. So that's where we have to figure out where we'll go with that in the citation. And it, if someone is willing to be a witness for us, that will help us, right? Like I'll go testify and say, this is why it's causing me a problem, because this buck rakes his antlers on my car door every day, and it's causing me damage, right? So that's easily articulated by what we can say. So nuisance is one of those words that is up for interpretation.
It seems like every time there's an issue, it's called game and fish, but I would have thought that it's a law and it's in effect, and it could be they could be cited by our police department under the state law.
I'm not sure. So our rule, that would be a regulation under our statute. It's a regulation put forth by our game commission. So there's a lot of them. It may be that they may not be able to, but I'm not sure right now. I'd have to look into that. Yes, sir. So good question. He said, is there a point where feeding becomes baiting? So the state of New Mexico looks at baiting as only if you're going to hunt over it. We don't allow that. So if someone was hunting over it, then that would be baiting. That's kind of the difference there. One more question. Yes, ma'am.
How, if we were county ordinance, how would that help?
Good question. So the question was, how, if they pass a county ordinance, how would that help us? So how that would help us is it frees up a little bit of our time of how many times we have to come out here to handle some of these. If they were able to, because since the city or county is right here, they would just be able to go handle it and write the complaint right there, and they may catch the person red-handed. Where for us, we are usually going to be at least a day away. That's just reality in our world, because I mean, I could be in Chama dealing with something, and then we can get a call here, and there's only 4 of us for this whole area from 550 to Colorado, the north central part of the state. So we have calls all over, and what that would do is it would have real consequences for their action in real time, more than us being reactive and doing a longer investigation that's going to need to have more evidence. Because yeah, I could take people's word that there was feed there, but if I never see it, never find anything, no evidence, they don't want to talk to me, then it takes a lot longer for me to try and figure out that that is where our problem is. Where the city, how fast can I be there? 5 minutes, or less, maybe an hour. I mean, that's more realistic, where, for us, it's a lot harder to those timelines. Unless we're here in town, those timelines are pretty far out. And then we're just dealing with wildlife complaints everywhere. I mean, that's part of our job. And I mean, for example, she was in Cuba this morning, and now we're here, right? So that's just the part of how we deal with our job that day to day. And I think that's where it would help us the most. Okay, so just as a update, if you need a trash ban, if you're listening online, make the request to the county, and they will be able to help you for the bear-proof trash cans. And environmental services will be here at Bear Fest this weekend on Saturday, and New Mexico Game and Fish will be here as well. So,
Okay, so last thing, I put this slide back up with how to contact officers. My work cell phone number is circulating on Facebook. Totally fine. You guys can call me if you have questions, concerns, anything like that. You can absolutely call me. But if I'm off, I'm not going to get that call for a couple of days. So the best way to reach an officer, especially if you have something that's pressing going on, is to call dispatch. If you call me and you have an emergency and something's going on and it's, you know, maybe a Thursday, I might be off. So utilize your dispatch. And that's it.
Thank you to both of you. And thank you to everyone online. I'm sorry for all the technical difficulties, but we made it through. So I hope you learned something this evening. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you at Bear Fest, right? Yeah. Have a good night.